Red Nation Press Radio. We have Linda Murphy. Hello, Linda.
Hi, Liz.
How are you tonight?
I'm doing great.
Great. I had the best time over the past week digging up all of your old speeches and appearances and watching you in action. It was really informative. It was great. And I have a lot of things that I want to talk to you about. I hope we're going to get some questions from the chat room, but it looks like the chat room's having a few technical difficulties. So anyone who's listening, if I don't get your questions, I'm really sorry. Technical difficulties, but I think I have plenty for you here, Linda, that'll keep us busy if we can't.
Well, education is a hot topic. We know there's a lot of discussion of education policy in the presidential race and around every state with Common Core and the testing issues. So I agree. There's a lot to talk about.
Absolutely. And I'll just go ahead and say before we get started that it's been amazing to watch kids opt out and see the things that they had to say about opting out of testing and their freedom. And it's really kind of been encouraging to me. Yeah, absolutely. So the fact that these children are developing their own ideas about it, it's just wonderful. And I think that an exercise in freedom, at the end, if this turns out to be an exercise in freedom where they learn things about their freedom that were never intended through this program, would be a wonderful thing.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
It really would. So
it's a backfire. It's really a backlash, a backfire, and it's inspiring, as you say, young people to think about their freedom and the loss of their freedom and not wanting to be programmed with a training program or continually assessed and measured for someone else to determine their future. And they're seeing this. I thank God for America.
Right, exactly. And I hear people say that from all over the world. And thank God for America very often it comes from someone who is an immigrant or someone who's escaped communism. And they get it. They totally get it. And sometimes I think that we're just too complacent, and we talk about that some amongst ourselves as well. So you were appointed to one of the earliest education standards pilot programs. What year was that?
In 1993, I was appointed to a local committee in our local public school where I had two children in public school at the time, and I am a teacher, certified teacher for over 30 years by our State Department of Ed, but I was not in the classroom at the time. I had a 1-year-old at home, and I had two children in school that were in public school, so I was appointed by the principal of the elementary school, who later greatly regretted it. But I had worked professionally for a number of years and traveled around the United States doing a lot of speaking on vision and learning development and research. So I was not intimidated by the, atmosphere of professionals trying to cram something down our throat. That didn't intimidate me. In fact, it fired me up pretty good to see that as an educator and as a parent, I was being put into a situation where they really were trying to force our consensus to agree to a plan that had really been predetermined. And that was outcomes-based education. Goals 2000, School to Work were all tied to that back in the administration of the Clintons. I say the Clintons because Hillary was very much involved with the education portion of it, particularly in Arkansas before they went to Washington. Through the National Governors Association, Bill Clinton had been very involved as a governor, and of course we're seeing Common Core, which is really just a rehash, and certain aspects of the plans have been altered and changed, which we could talk about. But overall, it's the same basic thing. It's a centralized control of education for the purpose of manipulating, social engineering, what ends up being the lives of our children for the workforce development.
Right, and as you could tell, even my golden retriever didn't really like the sound of that. So,
even he doesn't want to be one of Pavlov's dogs, maybe.
Absolutely, there you go. That's it, exactly, Linda. So you obviously you knew something was wrong at that point.
Right, I knew right up front because we were being led and basically pressured to come to consensus with these ideas. And at that time, the wording was prepare students for global citizenship for the 21st century. Nothing about academics was in the mission statement or the vision statement that we were supposedly writing ourselves, but the suggestions, what they do is bring you into what you might call and what a lot of people have identified as a Delphi technique, where you're brought into a group to come into group consensus, and the pressure of the group is supposed to bring everyone along, and it works real well for a lot of people, to bring people together. And a lot of times they even think it's their own idea, but I was a trained, educator. I knew the different philosophies of education, and what they were talking about was not an academic approach to education. And the more I learned, the worse it got. So it was just like one layer after another. And, of course, at that time in the 90s, we did not have personal computers at home like we do now. We did not have the Internet with web, browsing and research we could do there. So we had a lot of copies, a lot of memo machines. We didn't have email even. We just mailed or met and exchanged hard copies of information. It's the way that we got the word out, first locally and then statewide and then nationally. With what was going on. And we did repeal in the state of Oklahoma in 94. We repealed the standards that were supposedly the new standards produced within our state, but they were not academically focused. And they had a lot of what we call in education, we call the domain or the area of the affective, which is the emotions and feelings, attitudes, values, and beliefs, instead of cognitive, which is, facts, knowledge, information, academics that we normally think of. So our Senate at that time did kill those unanimously, and it forced our superintendent of schools to stand up in a press conference. She chose quickly to come back with a state senator who had been to Oxford. Later this was all in the paper, and there were little stories here and there that you put together, but she had gotten this great idea through the Oxford Roundtable. A lot of this is very much a globalist approach to education. So there are many other, entities involved when you look at it. The Economic Development, Office of Economic Development on the international level, there's a group there. Cooperation and Economic Development, Office of Cooperation and Economic Development. They are the ones that are behind the PISA test, which is the international testing that compares us with other countries. And then people hear, we're failing, we're so, low on the scale, we've got to change. And the first one on the list, the number one rated results have been in Shanghai, China. Now, people need to think about that for just a minute and consider, do we really want the same kind of education system that Shanghai, China has?
Well,
we don't care. That,
Right. Going back to your point, and the communists did it really successfully for a really long time. If you focus on the way people feel and their attitudes rather than giving them knowledge and teaching them how to think, it's a whole lot easier to control what they do.
That's right. Well, now the attitudes, values, and beliefs are not really integrated directly into the standards as we found in the 90s, but you will find them in what they're calling safety programs, various mental health programs. I've evaluated a plan in the state of Alabama, which is still on the table and up for vote soon, I understand. But that statewide plan developed with the state of Alabama, State Superintendent Bice, along with Berkeley, a University of Southern California, Berkeley mental health group. They put together a plan that is really a plan for goals for every student in the areas of mental health, including values and character and attitude. Very, very dangerous ground. So it's out there. It's just kind of reworked in a different way, not directly in the standards.
Well, and that was sort of my next question is, so when you saw Common Core coming down the road, you've been down this road before. Someone I used to work with would always say, the trees are starting to look familiar. We've been down this road before. So you see it coming, and you already know what it is, because they have a really great way of repurposing things that people hated. Obamacare was a repurposed Clinton care, basically.
Right, exactly. Hillary care, we called it.
Right.
Back in her day, and of course she failed at getting that done, and Obama got it done. But she wasn't president either. She was the first lady. So
that's true. But they repurposed things. So you saw this coming. You knew it was a repurpose. We've been there, done that, and so you knew that what was happening, basically.
Right, and especially as I started researching about what is happening right now today, and this was like in January of 2012, when I really started looking closer and closer, although I've watched it all of these years, knowing with Obama as president telling us right up front he's going to fundamentally transform America, and that history needed to be rewritten. I believe he or Michelle or someone in their administration said something to that regard. They said enough things that it was clear where the agenda was headed. It was a very progressive, transformational mindset rather than traditional education. So I was leery, I'll say that, guarded, watching. And then our own Oklahoma Governor Mary Fallon, who is still governor now, was reelected last November. She brought in Jeb Bush to have a couple of press conferences, and he was working closely with Governor Fallon through the National Governors Association plans and through his own Foundation for Education Excellence. And I knew what George W. Bush had done with education, with No Child Left Behind, when we had defeated in our state the outcomes-based education and the control of centralizing education so much. We had defeated quite a lot of that, several components of that. Then on the national level, right after that, on the heels of that, was George W. Bush becoming president, and with Ted Kennedy putting in place No Child Left Behind, which was more federal control with testing and more control of testing from the federal level. So, there are many components to that have been consistent throughout these efforts to equalize the outcomes for students, which you really cannot do. You cannot give them equal.
Right, exactly. And equalize the outcomes for students sounds like a really nice way of saying we're going to target the lowest common denominator.
Right, because they're bringing the bottom up and bringing the top down to get a more narrow set of standards. That's what Common Core is. That's what OBE was. Lynn Cheney, regardless of what political party you're from, because I'll quote people from the right and the left, Democrats, Republicans. We've got people of every political persuasion who see the control system that this is and the lack of academic education that it is and comment. So, but to go back, Lynn Cheney wrote an article called Limited Horizons a number of years ago. At the time I was involved earlier. In fact, I'd been out speaking statewide at that time. I ran for state superintendent of schools in Oklahoma in '94 and received 49.5% of the vote statewide.
Wow.
So you can't get much closer.
Of you. No, someone was afraid of you, I imagine. We're going to have to go to break real quick, and when we come back, I want to ask you about those groups that you talked about that are involved and about some of our, our lovely Republicans that are pushing Common Core, and maybe
yes.
why they're so behind it, and what we can do to help spread the word. So we're going to go to break, and we'll be back with Linda Murphy.
You're listening to War. We are America Radio, a place where conservatives, libertarians, and Tea Party Americans come together to get the real deal news. No filter and a lot of patriotic spirit. We are America Radio.
That's us. That's right. Gotta love this American ride. Both ends of the ozone burning. Funny how the world keeps turning. Look, Mom, no hands. I love this American ride. Gotta love this American.
All right, we are back. We are back with Linda Murphy. Linda, so we promised to ask you about the curriculum. I want to know from you, and you've talked a little bit about this. What is the most dangerous thing about the curriculum that's wrapped into Common Core?
I think the most dangerous thing in the way to summarize it all fits under this umbrella. It's a loss of local control. So that what you would have students learn for math, for English, the type of literature you would have them read will not be determined locally. They say, the proponents of Common Core say, oh, these are just standards. This is only standards, and teachers get to choose the curriculum and make decisions and plan the lesson plans. But because of the high-stakes testing, students are going to have to pass the tests, whatever the tests are that are prescribed or determined for that school district by the state, aligning and complying with the federal No Child Left Behind requirements, plus whatever the state decides, and then local administration even. In Oklahoma, we have some local school administrators who have defiantly said they're not going to stop doing Common Core, and they're still pushing it, and they're still doing it. And we have a new state superintendent who's not causing them to comply with the law, and that's a big problem for us. But statewide, it's repealed. So what you have locally is going to be determined by really what testing you're doing. If you're doing testing that is going to cover, true academics, then you're going to have that kind of curriculum. But if your testing is not going to be academic, but it's going to be the job training skills, whatever it is, that's what will really determine what's in the curriculum. The standards are very important, but if you put in a testing system that's really controlling everything, that can be more important than even what's in the standards. So right now, every local school district is unique. They're trying to bring everyone into compliance with a unity. We know that's what this is about, centralizing and getting everyone to have the same curriculum, the same standards, the same test, and narrow that down so that we're not, in terms of a business model, we're not going to be wasting the money, the resources on students that only are going to drive a truck. They're only going to be this. They're going to be a secretary, not a engineer. So we don't want to waste the resources in a business model. We want to train them for that specific job and make sure they've got the basic skills for that job, but no further. Well, that's not the freedom we've had in America. In America, you could drop out in the 8th grade, come back a year or two later, and get caught up, conceivably, and it's been done many times. You could drop out of high school and then go to college later and get caught up. But if you're in some of these European countries, you can't do that. You're on a track, and if you don't keep advancing on that track, you're not going to have that opportunity later on.
Right.
And we need to know that we've got a full curriculum. We want to know that students are learning. Certainly we want to know that they can read and, calculate and do these basic skills, but there's no way to measure everything that a student should be learning,
Yes.
It's more than you can measure.
Some of the things that we've heard about the Common Core curriculum, and it may be some of the ways that it's being implemented more at the local level, are things like not teaching American history the way that it happened, and teaching not very, in my mind and in my opinion, very unpatriotic things about America, and even, maybe some frightening things that they're teaching about Islam and jihad.
Yes.
Have you seen that?
Oh, absolutely. And now this is actually falling under, in some states, they've adopted certain history or social studies or civics standards that have this type of thinking in them. But in other states, they're really just with the math and English, ELA, English Language Arts, and math in the Common Core state standards. That was the basic two areas that they brought in first. But through the advanced placement testing, which 25% of the students nationwide take the advanced placement courses, and through those, which are under the College Board, that is where we're seeing the biggest push to rewrite history to just trends and things in history, but not factual information about, which is history. That's what history is. It's the facts and the information regarding events and people and happenings that are, important for us to know and to remember.
Right.
But in AP history, there is a real political agenda. This has been pointed out, I think, very well by the Georgia legislature. Excuse me. They had a hearing back several weeks ago where they brought in the head of the AP history from the College Board. And, of course, the College Board is now completely the very top person. The director is David Coleman, who is one of the chief architects of the Common Core state standards. He's now at the College Board, which is over AP history. So the incestual type relationships of this person being here and here and here, and all of this integrating and coming together when it's not officially Common Core, but it still is bringing in the same agenda, the same ultimate goal. So through AP history, that's where we're seeing a lot of this. If people will go to the American Principles Project.org, there is a website, and they have been very good at staying on top of exposing what's going on with the AP history. American Principles Project.org, and it's principal, P-R-I-N-C-I-P-L-E-S. Jane Robbins is an attorney there. She was there in the Georgia hearing. I saw that video. You can also find that video online, the AP history hearing in Georgia.
And those are
it is very well worth listening to.
Right, and those are the best and the brightest. Those are the smartest kids in school that are in the AP history program.
Exactly.
So it would make perfect sense to target them, and we're getting really used to this incestuous kind of thing. And if you didn't believe it, Hillary's emails certainly should have given you a clue that they pretty much do what they want to and use who they want to, and whatever relationships like that they've developed, it's
right.
It's a merry-go-round of people for sure. So let's talk about that a little bit. You talked about, let's talk about the groups that, and the Chamber of Commerce, I think, is
right. The Chamber of Commerce. Yeah, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce definitely behind this. They have in every state, the state chambers of commerce leadership have been pushing with this, with the governors in a lot of cases, through the National Governors Association, and that's bipartisan. Our Governor, Mary Fallin, was the chairman of the NGA, the National Governors Association, a year ago, and she introduced the America Works initiative, which is really like School to Work under Clinton's. It's the workforce development components that aren't included in the Common Core, which is the K-12. But America Works is also for K-12. And in their literature from the National Governors Association, they say that they are aligning education K-12 with the needs of business. It flips the services of education to satisfy business rather than to satisfy the parents and the students. And, of course, this is about the lives of the students. And as we spoke in the beginning, many children, many students, young adults are beginning to see this and are protesting this testing and this constant measuring of their performance, which then dictates to them who they are, what they will become. On down the road, the development of this is very treacherous,
right?
As we've seen in some European.
Right, and that's I think one of the dangerous things about it is they start when a child is really young. They determine what that child is going to be when they grow up, and there's never any. They don't allow the opportunities for the child during the process of their education and development to go beyond that. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah,
that's true. That's true because it's a very limited set of standards. Although, here's what's hard, and this is where we really work in what I do a lot. I work in the trenches of the grassroots a lot. When I ran for office before, it was a grassroots campaign. We have new people in our parties, in our political parties over the last 10, 15 years since I was really out there working last until this Common Core issue came to this place in 2012. But what I find is it's still a matter of communicating with enough people across your state that really get the bigger picture, and they know for themselves some of these facts. They need to know what's happening in their own school, in their own county, in their own state, in education. They need to see what's happening nationally. People can read online now. We've got so much information available. We've got a lot of good Facebook groups that are out there that share information, answer questions for people. Parents and Educators Against Common Core is a Facebook group that's national, started by a school board member out in California. I think there are like 40,000 people on there. Certainly Red Nation Rising is providing great information to people about Common Core, and we can all find it just entering a word or two to do a search and Google it, and you'll find more than you can read in a day on any one of these subjects.
We were pretty elated and a little bit surprised at the impact that Red Nation Rising did have, according to the University of Pennsylvania on the Common Core.
Yes.
So with that in mind, you were able to get it repealed in Oklahoma. I am guessing that was a huge grassroots effort. Do you have any advice for the rest of us? And we've got just a minute and a half before we have to go to break and say goodbye to you. What are your parting words on what we can do to get this repealed in our own states?
Well, the bottom line is to be informed and then to inform others. And certainly Red Nation Rising, your conservative groups are pretty active in most states. Some states have some that are liberal. We've got the BATS, which is the Bad Ass Teachers Association, and they have opposed Common Core. They formed to oppose Common Core. Now, they're into some other things I'm not going to agree with, but as far as Common Core, they can be very helpful on that. And this is the thing about politics, and because this is a political agenda that has to be stopped at the state capitals through your legislators. You want to have personal relationships with your own legislator, your House and your Senate member. They need to know you, they need to know your name, and you need to be informed and know how to tell them a few things that they can remember with some backup proof of what you're talking about. Find out locally. Like I said, they really need to know this is affecting our school and our communities in our state. And the main thing that I think we had to do, and I told the others that had already been working on this a little bit when I got started, although I'd worked on all this before, I stepped in knowing that we weren't getting there yet, and I said we've got to reach the people that are not part of the choir, so to speak, not just the people who already know and listen in the groups that are already involved in stopping this, but you've got to reach teachers and parents in your communities. So do not discount or underestimate how important it is for you to talk to people at church, at school, in your community groups, friends and neighbors, family. Show them why this isn't going to work and how we need to stop it and have local control where we set academic standards. I'm not against testing. I've always used testing, but it must be used appropriately. Absolutely. And the information on the student shouldn't leave the hands of the teacher, the parents, and the local school district.
Right, exactly. Now, as we go, and we're cutting to break now, I appreciate having you so much to talk about this and enlighten us. But there are presidential candidates that, as governors and not as governors, are very supportive of this, that we cannot count on to step in between Common Core and the schools. Jeb Bush is a big one, we know.
Yes.
John Kasich is one, which was a real disappointment to me.
Yes.
Anyone else that we need to know of?
Mike Huckabee is also for it, and all three of these men have been governors of their state. And through the National Governors Association, once again, I attended the National Governors Association meeting in 1995 in Chicago. And at that time, we had just elected a bunch of conservative governors across the country in 94. You probably kind of have heard about that, remember that, or, historically that's known. Newt Gingrich was the leader, Speaker of the House. We had lots of conservatives, and Bill Clinton was upset because he was losing his stronghold, in Congress. So in the governor's offices, we had lots of new conservative governors. So the NGA called together a meeting for education advisors, and they tried to bring us to consensus to agree to Bill Clinton's education agenda. And I spoke up and said, we will not be doing this in the state of Oklahoma. And I can tell you more later. We don't have time now, but it was like an explosion with one of the men there who was supposed to be bringing us to this right answer, which I was rejecting. And when I said that, then Virginia next to me, Governor George Allen's advisor said, we will not do this in Virginia. New Hampshire across from us said, we will not do this in New Hampshire. We say, don't tread on me. She said that, and we were just like, yes. So we rejected it then. That was in 95. But they brought it back through the NGA with lots of corporate money. Bill Gates, we haven't even talked about that. Lots of corporate money behind it.
Yeah, if the first one doesn't work, just drop it back and punt and find a different way to do it. Linda, I know that we'll have you back, to talk about more things that happened, especially how, these things have been squashed in the past. I wish I didn't have to let you go and say goodbye, but we're going into our last break. We appreciate you coming in to talk to us tonight so much, and have a great rest of your Memorial Day. Thank you, Linda.
Thanks.